also have Melissa, Rebecca, and Sue, and we're all volunteers. And this is a topic that we are all passionate about, and we're excited to just share a little bit of this information with you tonight. So, the first kind of overall topic: what is a plant-based diet? So you probably hear a lot about that recently. So it can be a lot of things, but the main focus is on fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, oils, whole grains, legumes, and beans. So you don't necessarily have to be a vegetarian or a vegan, but you would want to limit meat, seafood, eggs, dairy, other animal-based products. So you're choosing a higher proportion of your food from plant-based sources. Also, try to limit processed foods, which includes foods with a lot of added sugar. So there are different health benefits for choosing a plant-based diet. On the left, you can see some of the good things about a plant-based diet. It's it's naturally anti-inflammatory, high in fiber and antioxidants. Excuse me, lower in saturated fat. It's great for digestion, and it also helps promote good bacteria in the gut due to the high fiber. And a diet higher in animal products would be higher in saturated fat. Animal products actually contain no fiber, so it's more inflammatory. A lot of people are getting excess protein, more than they need. And the World Health Organization has declared processed meat as a carcinogen. So processed meat like pepperoni, deli meats, things like that. So in the center are a lot of like chronic health conditions that are prevalent: heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity, inflammation, cancer, and high blood pressure. So a lot of those can be, the risk of getting those could be decreased by eating more plants, less animal products. In addition to that, there's also the issue of factory farming in the U.S. So there's almost 10 billion animals that are exploited and slaughtered every year. They're bred in overcrowded conditions, which is just a perfect breeding ground for disease and antibiotic resistant bacteria. So it's not very clean. It's really easy to get that stuff spreading. They're also not feeding them the natural food that they evolved to eat. They're given hormones, they're given antibiotics, which also puts risk on the human population for drug resistant bacteria and also some disease outbreaks. So the CDC warns that 3 out of 4 new emerging infectious diseases in people actually come from animals. And these factory farms are making that more realistic. So another thing to think about when you're thinking about plant-based diet versus more animal products is the amount of protein and the amount of fiber. So the American Heart Association recommends that adults get 0.8 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of body weight. So that means like a 150-pound adult would get about 55 grams of protein per day. A lot of Americans are actually getting almost double this because they're eating a lot of meat and animal products. On the flip side, according to the USDA, the average adult needs between 22 and 34 grams of fiber. And the range there is because it was for like men or women of different ages. So there's a smaller range for like a man of a certain age. And you can look that up in the USDA website if you want to get more specific, but it's all within that range. But the average American only gets 16 grams. So we're getting too much protein, we're getting not enough fiber. So excessive consumption of animal-based proteins can actually be harmful. So they're higher in saturated fats, which can elevate your LDL or bad cholesterol. As I said, they contain no fiber. So fiber is really important for like digestion and keeping things moving. And then if you are eating a lot of animal products, you're probably eating less plant-based foods because the amount of food you're eating. So plant-based proteins specifically, so beans, lentils, chickpeas, soy, nuts, seeds, they're all great plant sources of protein. They are a better choice. They're loaded with antioxidants, fiber, and nutrients that can keep your heart healthy, reduce inflammation, and lower the risk of chronic diseases. Plus, they are great sources of protein. And here are just some other types of plant-based foods and some of the benefits. So beans are a great one for protein and fiber. They are low in fat. They have a lot of nutrients and phytonutrients. They help guard against diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and some cancers, while also building and repairing muscle. Alliums, which are things like onions and garlic and that whole family, they have antioxidant, antiviral, and antibacterial properties. They've also been shown to help prevent blood clots, be anti-inflammatory, immune boosting, and potentially anti-aging. Cruciferous vegetables, so things like broccoli and kale and cauliflower and bok choy, those are very low calorie. They're rich in folate, vitamin C, E, and K, fiber. Fiber is big across all the plants. Phytonutrients, which are plant-based compounds that can help lower inflammation and reduce the risk of developing cancer. And then greens, just any type of greens, Swiss chard, lettuce, kale, spinach. They are one of the healthiest and lowest calorie foods you can eat. They're packed with micronutrients, help reduce your risk of obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, and mental decline. And you do not have to become a vegan. We'll say this probably several times tonight, but none of us are vegans. We're not trying to tell people they need to become vegan. We're just kind of suggesting, it is better for you and the planet to eat more plants and less animal products. And here's some examples of diets that are not vegan that are still, really heavy on plants. So the Mediterranean diet, there's been a lot of studies on this diet. You can still eat poultry, fish, some, eggs and cheese, some dairy products. But it has been shown to reduce the risk of heart disease, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and certain cancers, depression, and can lead to a better mental and physical function in older adults. Vegetarians who don't eat meat, but they still eat eggs and dairy, have lower rates of coronary artery disease, lower rates of high blood pressure and diabetes, and an increase in longevity. And then pescatarians who don't eat, who only eat fish as well as like eggs and dairy, they have been shown to have improved heart and brain health and reduced cancer risk. So, there's a lot of options out there. And then if you are going to buy animal products, if you have the ability, it is great to support local farms that use sustainable practices so that you are not supporting the factory farms and, the animals are being treated in a better way. So that is the end of my part. I'm going to hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Tracy. Hi, my name is Melissa Romano, and I'm going to talk to you about all the various environmental impacts of the food products that you eat in the diet and your lifestyle. So all the data, all the details. So there's 5 main topics that I want to go over. Climate change is the biggest one, water use, land use, biodiversity, and our agricultural practices. Earth's average temperature has increased almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1850, about 0.11 degrees Fahrenheit every decade overall, but 3 times faster since the 1980s. The top 10 warmest years have occurred yearly in the past decade, with last year being the hottest and 2023 the next hottest. But these graphs kind of put that in perspective. We talk a lot about climate change and how hot it gets, and it's just going to continuing to increase in temperature until we get a hold on things. And eating a plant-based diet is ranked the 3rd highest solution according to Project Drawdown. And then the 4th highest would be reducing food waste. The top 2 biggest impacts that could affect climate change is our energy, being wind power and solar power. If you haven't checked out Project Drawdown, please go to that website and check it out. It has a lot of great information. And the reason why we're giving this whole presentation is because food production accounts for 23% of greenhouse gas emissions globally. That's a whole quarter. You can go to the next slide. So some of the factors that are incorporated in the climate change aspect, some of them all kind of overlap a little bit, but essentially we have the whole animal agriculture, but not just animal, even our plants are being grown. That's agriculture as well. But animal feed would be growing plants for the animals. And processing uses electricity, transportation uses fossil fuels. Packaging is a hidden one there. A lot of packaging is plastic and styrofoam, and those are not easily recyclable. They're polluting our earth, but they're both made from fossil fuels. They're made from methane, which is the second highest greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. It's 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide, but luckily it only lasts 12 years as opposed to carbon, which lasts 300 years in our atmosphere. Methane is released in the fracking process from leaks, abandoned wells, flares. They actually burn the gas when they have too much of it, and explosions. So, and then lastly, refrigeration. We're using electricity. We're using Freon. All these greenhouse gases are impacting our air and the climate change. And then next would be the methane that's released through what's called enteric fermentation. This is the digestive process of the cows. They burp and fart, and their poop contains methane in it, and that's being released directly into our air. Deforestation, this is where we're removing growth around the world to have grounds for our cattle. They take up a lot of space, and that's going to reduce the carbon storage in the trees with every tree we cut down. And then use of fertilizers, where fertilizers a lot of times are made from chemicals from fossil fuels. And so we're using the fossil fuels to make them, we're transporting them, we're putting them on our fields, they're contaminating our land, our soil. And as we use them, it releases carbon dioxide and methane in the air, but also nitrous oxide, which is another greenhouse gas. And this one is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And it lasts in our atmosphere about 120 years. 1/3 of our food production is wasted, and as food breaks down, it rots in our trash can, in our landfill, and it releases more methane as it breaks down. There is 3 billion people in this world who do not have access to healthy food, and 1 in 11 go hungry. And the cost of food keeps rising. So this is a big problem in our world. Yet 24% of our waste stream, our trash, is food. The food's carbon footprint actually doubles as it continues to rot and releases methane. I just want to give a couple little examples of climate change here in Pennsylvania, because a lot of times we talk about the world, we talk about the temperature rising, and a lot of the world experiences droughts because of this hot, extreme climate. But here in Pennsylvania, it's a little different. We actually are a little bit wetter. As climate change goes on, we get more rain because of the water in the air, in the water vapor in the air. So rainfall has rose 10 to 20%. And is expected to rise another 8% in Pennsylvania as the temperature keeps increasing. And what comes along with increased temperature and increased rain is decreased air quality. This means more mold, more pollen, more pests like ticks and mosquitoes, more flooding, more frequency and severity of storms. I don't think before 2000 we ever had a tornado in Pennsylvania, but now it's almost all the time. The weather is just getting more extreme because of the temperatures. And all this water can cause damage to our public infrastructure, our land, our farms. The climate change really affects the agriculture, and the agriculture affects climate change. So it's a continuing loop, and we need to rein in somehow to lower our carbon footprint through food diet is what we're hoping today. You can go to the next slide. So this is a good graph that kind of puts that in perspective. Animal protein creates 10 times as much carbon dioxide as plant protein. The average American consumes about 2,000 pounds of beef annually. Replacing beef with plants can reduce, sorry, I messed that up. The average American diet of beef consumption creates about 2,000 pounds of carbon dioxide annually. And by replacing that with plants, brings that down to 73 pounds. You can see on that very top line that beef is number one. That's the biggest thing you can give up is your cheeseburger. I know it's hard to see a lot of it, but the icons, the color in it, the green is the land impact, the deforestation, the carbon storage. The brown is the emissions from the farming, the fertilizer, the methane, the manure, the tractors, all that. Orange is the animal feed. Blue is the processing, the energy that's used. Red is the transportation. Yellow is the retail, the refrigeration. And then that gray is the packaging, that plastic and everything. So I think it's interesting. The beef is obviously the top choice. You eliminate that, you're making a big change. The next ones are lamb, cheese, chocolate, and coffee. Those are really high up there, and that's sad to me. But you can see all the way at the bottom, you have nuts, and in the middle is olive oil. It's a little hard to see, but both of those actually have a negative impact because they store the carbon in their trees. You can go to the next slide. Another little graph that really makes a good comparison. We're comparing 110 grams of whatever food on the chart compared to like a journey in your car, the emissions that you would have when you take a little trip down the road. So under each icon of food, there's a number, and that's the carbon dioxide equivalent per kilogram. You can see beef and lamb are all the way at the top, and everything else is way down past the middle. On the right there, that's the equivalent. 1 kilogram of beef is the same as driving 176 kilometers. It's pretty impressive. You can go to the next slide. All right, so now we're going to move on to the water use. So on the left there, that chart, it shows how much water we have, right? The whole planet is 75% water. It's a lot of water. 97.5 of that is salty ocean water, so that's not drinkable. We have about 2.5% that's fresh water, but unfortunately 70% of that is locked away as ice, and then 30% is what's left, and most of it is actually polluted. So we have 1% of water that's accessible. 70% of that 1% is groundwater, like rivers and lakes. And then 30% of that is aquifers. Those are underground water supplies that take millions of years to accumulate water and filtrate anything from the water. So we are not able to replenish that as much as we are taking away from that. So we have 1% of water accessible to us. 70% of that 1% is used for agriculture, watering our farms, and 22% is used for industry. So that number at the bottom, that 0.08%, that's what we have to drink out of the whole world. So, you know, we're talking water next, we talk land. We only have one earth, and we have to be able to leave some of this water and land for future generations. I like this chart on the right. It talks about how much water is used per food item there. It takes about 320.3 gallons for 3 ounces of beef. So if we're talking a pound that you're making a hamburger helper, you're closer to 1,800 gallons of water to make that 1 pound of beef. So beef is also very consuming of our water. Some of the other ones I find interesting, you know, nuts, they take a lot of water too. So, you know, there is pros and cons to every food choice. And that's a choice that everybody has to make. You can go to the next slide. All right, so here's our land. And these crack me up because the last one said 75% and this one says 71% water, but here we are. So 29% of our Earth is land. Out of that, 71% is habitable. 10% is glaciers and almost 20% is just barren. So from that 71% of land, half of it is used for agriculture. 38% is forest, 14 is shrubs, and that little sliver next to it, 1%, that is us. That is our urbanization. This is where we live. So out of that 46% of agriculture there, you could see 77% of it is used for the livestock, for the cattle ranches. And 29% is used to grow our food. So we are using a lot of land for cattle for us to eat beef. Another comparison, it takes 6 pounds of plants to create 1 pound of beef on a cow. And half of its weight is edible. So it takes 12 pounds of plants to equal 1 pound of beef to eat. But think of all that land. We could be growing all this food, eliminating the cows and just eating all the plant-based ourselves and be able to feed all those hungry people in the world. You can go to the next slide. Another factor towards our environment is the biodiversity loss caused by this deforestation. Number one, removing the vegetation. It forces all the insects and animals that live there to either relocate or die. According to Wikipedia, about 20% of the Amazon rainforest is deforested, and that's about 750,000 square miles, and 80% of that deforestation is for cattle ranches. 20% is logging, soybean farms, oil drilling, roads, mining, and unfortunately also drought and fires are playing a big role in that. As the earth heats up, we're seeing a lot more forest fires, and the Amazon is not immune to it. So last year was the biggest year that they had for forest fires in the Amazon. Next is pesticides. This is chemicals that we're using to kill, pests that eat the plants that we want to eat or the plants that we want to feed our cows. But in addition to killing pests that are bothering those plants, we're also killing pollinators and insects and microorganisms that live in the soil. And pesticides are directly linked to causing 40% of insect extinctions. Pesticides are usually applied about 6 to 17 times per year. And then after that would be herbicides, another chemical that we're using. And this is to kill the weeds, kill the crops that we don't want growing with our crops. And it's used on about 75% of our crops. Herbicides are typically only applied 1 to 3 times per year though. 1 million out of 8 million species on our Earth are in danger of extinction. Other causes that can contribute towards extinction are pollution, invasive species, and overexploitation of natural resources. And then we want to talk about genetically modified crops. We are modifying our seeds to be able to grow into plants that are resistant to pesticides and herbicides. So while eating a genetically modified food product is not necessarily bad for your health, it is bad for the environment because now we're able to use more pesticides and herbicides because it's not going to kill the plant. And unfortunately, 94% of our soy, corn, canola, and cotton are genetically engineered. Next slide. All right. So now onto the actual agriculture, the growing of our foods and the foods that we're feeding our animals. Tilling has been used for a long time. It's been shown to really degrade the soil. It compacts it, strips nitrogen, it causes erosion, decreases moisture. It's generally used by fossil fuel machinery to till the land. So This practice is used in about 1/3 of the farms in the US. 1/3 of the farms don't use it. And then there's another 1/3 that uses what they call conservative tilling, where they do a little bit, but they're kind of in the middle there. The United Nations Food and Agriculture estimates that 75 billion metric tons of soil are lost annually from erosion. In addition to tilling, it's also the irrigation systems, that heavy rainfall from the climate change. It's washing the soil away. And then we're back to the pesticides and the fertilizers again. I just wanted to mention pesticides. They typically last about 40 days in our soil and 24 hours in our water. Herbicides can last 1 to 3 years in our soil and 90 days in our water. And fertilizers can last 1 to 7 days. There's different types of fertilizers, though. There is organic fertilizer, manure, compost, things like that, which is beneficial. And it unfortunately is only used in about 11% of our farms. There's also called mineral fertilizer. This is phosphorus and potash, and these things are actually mined from the environment, and about 1/3 our farms use that. But 63% of our farms use industrial fertilizers, which are made from man-made chemicals. They take nitrogen from the air combined with hydrogen from methane, and they produce ammonia. This process emits carbon dioxide and methane, and once it's applied to crops, it releases the nitrous oxide into the air. And then we get into a fun term called biosolids, otherwise known as sewage sludge. This became really popular in the 1990s. It was a good way to get rid of something that they can't get rid of, right? So we sprayed our farms with sewage. And we use this about 56% of our land, about 31% for agriculture, 25% for landscaping, and then 27% does get landfilled and 16% gets incinerated. Interestingly enough, Maine is the only state in the United States that has banned this practice. We have something called the Clean Water Act, which regulates our drinking water. It does require the removal of some chemicals like arsenic, copper, lead, mercury, and lots of others. But the one thing that, or two things that it's not, is PFAS and microplastics. These are newer things. PFAS is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are known as the forever chemicals. You might know them from like firefighter foam, Teflon, Scotch Guard, microwave popcorn bags, but they're also in cosmetics, shampoos, dental floss, fast food wrappers, and now it's in our soil, our water, our food, and even ourselves. What we do know about PFAS is that it can cause cancer, can cause infertility, cause birth defects, developmental delays in kids, and hormone interference. But there's a lot we don't know about it. We do not know how much we have been exposed to as humans, our wildlife, our environment. And we do not know how to detect, measure, remove, manage, or dispose of it. So this is something to hopefully we can combat in the future. And if you want to learn more about that, we also have a webinar like this one tonight on PFAS. We have a recording on our website, haverfordclimateaction.org, and we'll be doing another webinar on it in 2026. We usually do a lot of these webinars over and over again. So now that I told you all the bad stuff, what's the good stuff? So we have a practice regenerative agriculture. So, you know, rather than tilling and killing everything, oh, sorry, I missed one. Hold on, let me go back. Eutrophication, overload of nutrients causing dead zones in bodies of water. So all that runoff of the soil, the fertilizers, the pesticides, the herbicides, it's all flowing from our farms downstream, and it's entering our rivers, our lakes, our oceans, our everything. We have about 500 dead zones on Earth. 65% of coastal waters are moderate to severely degraded by excessive nutrients. These dead zones kill plants and animals, which can increase the carbon dioxide, reduces the growth of fish and shellfish, decreases the pH, causing acidification. But it also can increase the growth of algae, which actually can be life-threatening to humans, birds, and marine life. One of the closest dead zones that most people around here probably have heard of is the Gulf of Mexico. It's about 4,000 square miles wide, but it's not the biggest one on Earth. The biggest dead zone on Earth is in the Arabian Sea, and it's 63,700 square miles. Okay, so now I'll move on to the good stuff, the regenerative agriculture. So this is not necessarily a practice like tilling. It's a combination of sustainable techniques. It's using cover crops, rotating crops, using compost, pest management, like using predators instead of pesticides, designing the lands better, using ridges to prevent erosion, more diverse plants and trees, and help the biodiversity. So there is hope. There is future farming improvements to be done, and hopefully we will get there. Next slide. All right, so we have some new food technology, lab-grown meats, plant-based meats, and greenhouse-grown produce. In general, a lot of them have a lot less emissions associated with it, less energy, less land, less water, you know, compared to beef. But using a greenhouse does use more electricity and definitely more plastic and waste associated with that plastic. The first cheeseburger that was lab grown was in 2012, and the cost was about $325,000 to make. So far we're still kind of in the testing phase. It's not going to be commercial yet, but the plant-based meats are largely available in most stores. But again, you need to look at what's in them and how they're made. All right, I think I just have one more slide, or two more. Just kind of sum everything up, what I told you, you know, cutting beef, that makes a huge difference. You could see you can practically cut your carbon footprint in half just by cutting out beef alone. Little bit less for a vegetarian and vegan, but like we said, you one step at a time. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to become vegan. None of us are. Next slide. So I talked a lot about carbon footprint. I just want to touch on your ecological footprint. This is another website if you want to check out the footprintnetwork.org. Your ecological footprint measures how fast we consume resources and generate waste compared to how fast nature can absorb our waste and generate new resources for us. Like I said, we want to leave some land, some water, you know, our animals, you know, all this stuff we want future generations to be able to enjoy. And if we're being too greedy, we don't have enough planets to support some lifestyles. I like the chart on the right there. It shows 1972 is when we started, and we were pretty close to just, you know, using what we had on Earth. But every year we use a little bit more, a little bit more. If you go to this website, it's a very interactive website. You can enter in what kind of home you live in, what kind of electricity you use, what kind of car you drive, what kind of diet you have. It'll ask if you eat meat a lot, a little, none, that kind of stuff. And it will actually calculate your ecological footprint. There at the end, it talks about the overshoot day. That's the day where we use our whole year's worth. Currently, that overshoot day in 2025 was July 24th. So a little over half the year, we're using an entire year's worth of resources. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca, and she's going to talk more about avoiding food waste. You want to unmute yourself, Rebecca?
Okay, there you go. Sorry. um, I don't know if we talked about the word reducitarian yet in our program, but we have been using this for a few years. Just because we're talking about reducing the high energy, high climate change causing things, but maybe not cutting them out altogether. So avoiding food waste for reducitarians is important to us because ranked with all the countries in the world, food waste would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases. It's behind the United States and China. So it would be its own country if that was, when the greenhouse gases are calculated for the food being wasted, the waste of the everything that went into making the food, and then the methane, like Melissa said, when it's rotting. Next slide, please. And again, the third of the food raised and prepared worldwide isn't even eaten. So that's a huge waste when you consider that so many people are hungry. In lower income countries, it's due to accidental infrastructure problems, like when the power goes out for their refrigeration or a transport doesn't happen at the right time. But most of the food waste in the US is caused by people at home throwing their food out because they didn't have a plan before shopping, or they were not sure when the expiration was, or they get tired of leftovers. Some of it is from aesthetic rejection of irregularly shaped and sized food by grocery stores and other retailers. And then a lot of it is over-serving in restaurants and catered events. So you see down at the bottom chart, 43% of this is in our homes and 40 in restaurants. So those are kind of a similar amount, and then a smaller portion is from the farms and from when the food is being manufactured or processed. Next slide, please. So either way, like I said, all the resources along the way have been wasted. So from buying the seeds to spraying water on the fields, irrigating, and the labor hours of everyone involved, and the transportation costs, which are usually fossil fuel based too. Fossil fuels have been used and greenhouse gases have been generated. And even in the last stage, when it ends up in the landfill, it's producing methane. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So our group brainstormed about what we can do in our kitchens. And a lot of it is just taking time to plan your meals and snacks based on what you like, what's happening that day for dinner, what's reasonable for you to prepare, and looking at what you already have. So having a list and figuring out how to eat everything before it goes bad, or switch up your leftovers so they're more appealing to you. And also just taking time to unload your groceries and wash and divide up and prep so things don't go bad in the drawers, everything. Go ahead to the next slide, please. Then there's a great Haverford Township composting program. Mother Compost and some other composting companies are active in our area. But there will be a composting workshop and reduced price compost bins available on January 15th. So I think that's an in-person workshop. Is that right, Melissa? Okay.
No, they're always virtual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so it's a virtual workshop, but then you have access to reduced price compost bins for your backyard. So also with your veggies or your meat bones, whatever you're using, I like to throw mine in the freezer and then crock pot them so that I can make broth out of them. It kind of reduces the amount of them and also just gives the food a new life. if you're making broth for something else you're gonna fix later. Composting in your yard is a great way to not landfill all of your food waste. Like I said, Mother Compost is active around here. I think Bennett Compost is active around here. And you can get started composting either with one of those groups or in your backyard. Next slide, please. When we are deciding where to buy our food from, one way to avoid waste is buying from a company like Misfits Markets. They have some packaged things that that they have gathered that they'll have like quinoa that was supposed to be 3 colors but is only 2 colors. It's really good stuff, and it's at a discount. And it's also taking food out of the waste stream and making sure it gets repackaged. And it's it's very appealing to consumers. It's a really good program. Also buying from the farmers market to avoid all the plastic packaging in the grocery stores. Buying from a CSA, a community supported agriculture program. From Philly Food Works, the local section of the grocery store. And that will reduce your food travel miles. So that's cutting back on the fossil fuels used, to bring your food here. And like Melissa was saying about the regenerative farming, we did see during COVID how much more resilient the smaller farms were around here. They're trucking shorter distances. They have a more diverse offering, and they're not dependent on the industry that has such possible supply chain problems. You could also start gardening yourself. That's a great way to grow what you like and not have any packaging involved. Go ahead to the next slide. And avoiding some packaging, avoiding as much packaging waste as possible is ideal. It's really difficult right now, I feel like, especially when you are busy and need to get what you need from the store. If the only bananas they have, for example, are like the one in the picture, sometimes you just buy the bananas. But when you can avoid it, obviously that's much better for the environment and for you. Over the past several years, a West Coast study showed that the USDA waste reduction commitments and financial incentives really did encourage the grocery stores to donate and compost more of their food. So that's something that is a good trend in grocery stores and retail. Then we could think about what would be valuable incentives for our local stores to do the same thing. That's something, that we could tackle in the future, but I don't have the answers right now. Next slide, please. And then at restaurants, ordering, like just choosing to order the lower climate items is ideal. The choosing the vegetarian or vegan or seafood instead of beef is one way to vote for the food system that you want to see, and bringing your own to-go items. So you can bring back your leftovers so they won't get wasted at the restaurant, just thrown out in the dumpster behind the restaurant. I do try to keep some extra containers in my car so that when I go out and I have some leftovers, I can put them in there. That especially avoids the styrofoam that a lot of the restaurants around here are using for their to-go containers. And recent laws, policies, and new apps are making it easier for restaurants and caterers to pass on uneaten food to those who need it. I've also seen at at Giant and the bigger grocery stores, they also have shelves of food that is near the expiration date and discounted and ready to go. So they are making an effort also to not just throw out food. If your business uses a caterer, you could find out if they participate in a food donation program and encourage them to. You do have, strength in numbers when you have a situation like that. Next slide, please. So we could talk about at the end of this what your tips might be and share in the chat. I think Tracy is going to open up the chat for that. So some of my personal efforts are using a compost bin to make compost. I make compost tea. I also use mother compost. And then really having a meal plan that helps me figure out that tacos might not be on Taco Tuesday. My tacos might be ready, in 2 days from whenever I buy them at the store, or my avocados might be ready in 2 days from when I buy them in the store. And then until recently, my kids wouldn't eat the dishes with things touching each other, so I had to separate out all of the elements, to keep us from wasting his portion of the food. So you'll be given a chance to share your tips too later. Next slide. I think that might be it for me. All right. I think Sue is next with her.
Hi, I'm Sue Stoggard. I'm going to be talking about the next piece of this is what should I eat? What we liked about this reducitarian approach was that it keeps it accessible and achievable for the majority of us. So we're not having to give up something necessarily that we love. It might just be that we're not eating it as frequently or that we're adding in other things. And we can cater our meals and to the things that we like and that meet our nutritional needs. So the first thing with this is really just keeping it healthy. And I know Tracy talked about this, but keeping in mind the nutritional needs for you, your family members, thinking about, based on age, teenagers, might need more calories. Somebody who's very active might need more calories than somebody who's older. Keeping in mind your health needs in your phase of life. Of course, again, being selective about highly processed foods. Those are things that you don't want to be including on a regular basis in your diet, but maybe keeping to more, select occasions. Aiming for lots of variety and colored fruits and vegetables, focusing on whole grains, watching sugar, salt, and saturated fat intake, drinking water versus your sweetened beverages. And a lot of you may, know these things already. And then if going completely plant-based, and with this, we're thinking like the teenager who goes vegan, who just omits food from their diet, but isn't adding in new things. It's important to do your research on what to do to keep your diet healthy and talking to your doctor about, if you need to supplement. So we can go to the next slide. So the first thing you can really do is just the first step is really reducing. So maybe thinking of using meat as more of a side dish, focusing more on the grains, your vegetables, using casseroles or sheet panned type of dinners. I think of like those bowls that people like to make with like a grain or vegetables are ways that you can reduce meat. For things like chili or tacos, you can use more beans or more vegetables and less meat within them. So you're still having some of it, but maybe using a smaller amount. Going back to those slides that Melissa has showed, you can use animal products substitute those animal products with a higher environmental impact like beef with something like chicken. So maybe incorporating more chicken, more fish. You can replace some of your ricotta in like a lasagna with mashed and seasoned tofu. You can use less cheese on top of a casserole in your salad or in a sandwich. The next slide, please. You can also simply just rotate in more of those meals that you already know and love. And so it might be a pasta dish, it could be a chili or soup, a grain salad, a vegetable salad, a baked oatmeal recipe, and incorporate more of those into your rotation of your meals. Next slide, please. If you want to take it a step further and try more plant-based meals, there's a variety of ideas and things that you can do to substitute or to add in. So you can try non-dairy milks, cheeses, yogurts, and meat substitutes. I always like to still check the nutrition labels and make sure it meets my needs. You can use chickpeas. Chickpeas are really versatile. You can use more of those on your salad in place of some of the chicken or all of the chicken. You can use them in a chicken noodle soup type of soup and replace the chicken with chickpeas and the broth with like a vegetable broth. And they can also be mashed and seasoned like you would tuna salad or a chicken salad. You can use seasoned and mashed black beans and tacos, homemade veggie burgers, veggie meatloaves, veggie meatballs made with beans. Falafel can be used on sandwiches or salads, and you can incorporate also high protein grains like quinoa, wild rice, millet into your diet as well. Next slide. Tofu, I know tofu can be sometimes polarizing, but with flavorful sauces, it can be really delicious in your meals. It can be scrambled and used to replace eggs. There's recipes that have more of a Tex-Mex style, and some also taste more like traditional scrambled eggs. So there's recipes out there that you can use that. You can add more nuts and seeds to your diet. There are recipes for like cashew cheeses or cheese sauces that can be made with plant milks or with nuts. There's one that's, I know our group has used, some members in our group have used this popular with taking like cashews and nutritional yeast, garlic, and salt, and you put it in your food processor or blender and make it like a crumble that you can use in place of Parmesan cheese. During the pandemic, or when eggs have been in short supply, flax eggs or eggs made with either flaxseed or aquafaba, the drained liquid from your canned beans, and like applesauce and bananas can be used in place of eggs in products like quick breads and muffins and pancakes. You can also use plant milks in those as well. And then last, Rebecca talked a lot about this, but using a vegetable broth made from homemade scraps in place of like chicken broth or even a store-bought one. I find that using ones that are really mild in flavor tend to work well as a substitute for chicken broth, or using vegetables in your homemade broth that are more mild tend to give you a more neutral flavored broth that works well. Next slide, please. On the Have You Heard of climateaction.org/food-choices page, there's a list of common substitutions that you can find, and even some recipes that you can use for things like buttermilk or for replacement eggs in your baked goods. And I won't go through all of these. I mean, this is a lot of the things I've already talked about, but that's a helpful resource to have handy. Next slide, please. Another thing that you can do is simply just trying some new recipes. And so there are some great websites out there that have a combination of either vegetarian meals or some low or meat type of recipes. Minimalist Baker does incorporate some meat, but also has lots of vegan and vegetarian recipes. Love and Lemons, I believe, and I think Cookie and Kate are more vegetarian, but this can be places to find ideas for things to cook. Next slide, please. Here are some cookbooks that our group has used. The Becoming Vegetarian one is more of a resource for plant-based diets in terms of what is not so much a cookbook, more of a resource for nutrition. It's written by 2 registered dietitians and goes through planning a vegetarian or plant-based diet through the lifespan. So if you're thinking of, or you have a child or who has gone vegan and you're trying to help them, that can be a helpful resource for carefully planning a healthy diet. And the next slide. There's plenty of restaurants locally that you can try out. This can be a good idea for way to try some new foods and see what you like. There's some of these are completely vegan, some of them are vegetarian, some of them have a mixture, but they have generally some options. One that was surprising was Wilson's Secret Sauce in Upper Darby. I haven't tried it yet, but it's a barbecue place, but they do have lots of vegetarian, vegan options on their menu. And next, Tracy is going to be talking about goal setting.
So thank you, Sue. So we were thinking, after hearing all of this, we wanted to turn it back to you guys and just see, after hearing this, is there something, it can be very small, but like, is there something you're thinking that you might want to try? So we have this like way to set a goal to make it measurable. So it's called a SMART goal. You want to be specific, you want it to be measurable, something attainable, relevant, and time-based. So it's really something you can see, did I do it or not? So the example that we use here is, I will be preparing 3 meatless dinners per week in 2 months. So you're giving yourself time. You have like a specific number of what you're going to hit. So then how am I going to get there? There's 3 steps: research new recipes, test 1 new recipe each week, and then save the favorites, add them to a regular dinner rotation, do that for a few weeks. And then by the time, when you get to 2 months, you want to be at the, 3 dinners per week without meat. So that's just an example. But if anyone has something they want to share, you can put it in the chat, or, you're welcome to share it on the call as well. I think Melissa can see the chat, so we can, we can keep it anonymous if you prefer. And, just to get some discussion going on what people are thinking. And then while you're thinking about that, we have a couple more slides. I think, Melissa, this is your slide.
Yes, sure. So just a couple tips written down for you. We talked a lot about reducing or eliminating certain food products, growing your own. We didn't mention too much on efficient cooking techniques. So another contributing climate change factor would be whether or not you use gas, natural gas, or propane, or, what are you cooking your foods with? We also have another webinar. It's called Electrification and Heat Pumps. So if you would like to learn more about stovetops or heat pumps or solar water heaters, all kinds of other ways to reduce your fossil fuel consumption in your home, there's a workshop. We just had one, I think it was last week, but again, we have all these workshops pre-recorded on our website, and then we'll be coming up again next year. Avoiding or limiting your packaging, especially styrofoam and plastic. They're just really bad for our environment. Another workshop we have is recycling. If you have questions on that plastic, what to do with it, what can be recycled, what can't be, that's another workshop as well. And like Rebecca said, reducing your food waste. Leftovers, making new meals from leftovers, and definitely some kind of composting. It's incredible that our township offers 4 months free composting service. That's available through a grant. Not every town can offer that kind of thing. So if you do not compost, I would definitely take advantage of that. Give it a try for 4 months. Tracy, you can go to the next slide. I think we have just some of our upcoming workshops. We talked about a couple of them. Most of them are offered through the environmental committee, with the exception of November 18th is recycling workshop. So I do the presentations for the recycling workshops. I do them 4 times a year, and we do 2 through the township through the environmental committee, and then we do 2 through the Haverford Adult School. So it's also another free option. But the nice thing about that is it's always in person. It's at the high school. And then we have some other upcoming workshops in the next several months, and they continue all year long. The last one is our glass recycling bin. It's permanently at the crack if you don't know about that. All the glass collected curbside in your recycling can is used for landfill cover. It actually covers the smells, keeps rodents out, things like that. So this bin at the crack does recycle your glass, and it's not just reused. All right, I think the last slide just might be some questions. Oh, our information, how to contact us. If you haven't heard, I mentioned it a million times, haverfordclimateaction.org. This is a website created by the Environmental Committee. It has everything you need, from like the home, the energy usage, your car, your transportation. There's our whole food section. There's a recycling and waste section. There's a plant and gardening section. So there's tons of information. It has a lot of local resources, local businesses, local actions you can take in our town. The EAC is also on Facebook and Instagram. All of our videos, these workshops are recorded on our YouTube channel. And then we have our email is habswitch@gmail. Any questions, if you want to join our meetings, whatever you need, send us an email and we'll try to help you. All right, so I think that's it. And now it's any questions, or there is nothing in the chat. I guess we answered everything.
Are you going to share the slides?
We can share the slides, sure. Yeah.
There's a ton of very useful information on there. Thank you.
Most of that information is on our website.
Okay.
So the website was created based on a lot of this information from this workshop.
I do have another question.
Sure, go for it.
Using tofu, do you all have recipes that you can recommend to make it tasty?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell you the two ways that I make tofu, and I'm probably not the best one here. Maybe somebody else can share. But mine, I like to season it either like teriyaki or something like that. And I'll slice it really thin and put it in my air fryer. And then I'll have it with like rice and vegetables and things like that. Somebody recently had told me about like a pulled chicken kind of thing. So shredding your tofu and just frying it. Smoked paprika is a really good spice that kind of gives things that like meaty flavor, but it's all about the seasoning. So did you want to add to that?
I was gonna say like the same. I usually I have like a peanut sauce that I make and I bake them. So I press it first under like some heavy weights with like towels or between the tofu and the plates to get the moisture out, and then I bake it. And I marinate it a little bit with like or dip it in like soy sauce and like maybe I think I use a little cornstarch too, and then bake it so it's has a little different, a little crispier texture, and then I have like a sauce for it. But there's other ways too, and some of those like recipe websites have some good recipes for those.
Yeah, I put mine, typically I'll do like a stir fry. So whatever the stir fry sauce is, that the tofu like really absorbs whatever sauce you put with it, because it doesn't really taste like anything on its own. So it's all about the sauce. So finding a sauce you like and then using that could make it really tasty.
I use my air fryer too. My oven has one. And so that's an easier way to like get it to not be that mush. Like if you don't like it mushy, just get that little crispy edge on it with your air fryer.
And I recommend if you don't want it mushy, buy extra firm tofu.
Any other questions? All right. I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining. We will have this workshop posted on our website soon.
Thank you so much. It's been
Yep.
great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yep. Great tips all around.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.